In this nervous system part 4 video, we will cover spinal cord. Spinal cord are protected by an outer covering of skin and vertebrae and by the layers of connective tissue called meninges and by cerebrospinal fluid. The spinal cord is a thin column of nerves, elongated, almost cylindrical, leading from the brain to the vertebral canal, surrounded by the meninges and cerebrospinal fluid. The spinal cord is continuous above with the medulla oblongata and extends from the upper border of the atlas to the lower border of the first lumbar vertebra. It is approximately 45 cm long in adult males and is about the thickness of the little finger. The spinal cord provides two ways of communication to and from the brain and contains the spinal reflex centers. The spinal cord is enlarged in the cervical and lumbar regions to accommodate the number of nerve fibers going to and from the limbs. 31 pairs of spinal nerves attached to the spinal cord between vertebrae. We will learn more about these nerves when we cover the peripheral nervous system. There are two layers of spinal cord, an outer layer of white matter and an inner layer made up of grey matter, which surrounds a small central canal. The spinal cord is enclosed within the vertebral canal, which forms a protective ring of bone around the cord. Other protective coverings include the spinal meninges, which are three layers of connective tissue coverings which extend around the spinal cord. The spinal meninges are continuous with those of the brain. The spinal meninges consist of pia mater, inner layer, arachnoid mater, middle layer, and dura mater, the outermost layer, which consists of a dense irregular connective tissue. In the spinal cord, the dura mater has a single layer and is not attached to the vertebral column. The inner surface of the dura mater contacts the outer surface of the arachnoid mater, which is the middle meningeal layer of the spine. An epidural space exists between the dura mater and vertebrae, which is padded by fat and vein network. CSF fills the subarachnoid space, which lies between the arachnoid and pia mater meninges. The dural and arachnoid membranes extend inferiorly to the S2 level, which is far below the end of the spinal cord that ends between the L1 and L2 levels. The spinal cord ends between the L1 and L2 levels. The subarachnoid space inside the meningeal sac inferior to the lumbar region is an excellent spot for the removal of CSF. This procedure is called a lumbar puncture or spinal tap. As you can see in figure, a cross-section of the cord shows both grey and white matter. The grey matter is in the center of the cord and arranged in an H letter, the points of which are called horns. The grey matter is composed of dendrites, cell bodies, and short unmyelinated neurons, that is, interneurons. These interneurons synapse with other neurons in the spinal cord to carry a message from the cord up to the brain or out to the body. The white matter of the spinal cord contains myelinated axons of neurons arranged in columns. Axons in ascending columns carry messages to the brain, while axons in descending columns carry messages away from the brain, and the axons are grouped together in tracks with a similar function. Figure shows how a sensory, that is primary, neuron from the skin goes to the spinal cord. There, it synapses with an interneuron, so its message can be eventually carried to the brain on myelinated axons in the lateral column on the left side of the cord. The functions of interneuron is to facilitate communication between sensory and motor neurons with relatively short distances. Descending tracts from the cerebral cortex carry motor messages on myelinated axons in the anterior and lateral columns of the cord. The human spinal cord is divided into 31 different segments. At every segment, right and left pairs of spinal nerves form, that is, mixed sensory and motor nerves. 6 to 8 motor nerve rootlets branch out of the right and left ventrolateral sulci in a very orderly manner. Nerve rootlets combine to form nerve roots. Each segment of the spinal cord is associated with a pair of ganglia called dorsal root ganglia, which are situated just outside of the spinal cord. These ganglia contain cell bodies of sensory neurons. Axons of these sensory neurons travel into the spinal cord via the dorsal roots. The spinal cord is supplied with blood by 3 arteries that run along its length starting in the brain, and many arteries that approach it through the sides of the spinal column. The 3 longitudinal arteries are called anterior spinal artery, right posterior spinal arteries, left posterior spinal arteries. These travel in the subarachnoid space and send branches into the spinal cord. The spinal cord plays a vital role in various aspects of the body's functioning. They are carrying signals from the brain. The spinal cord receives signals from the brain that control movement and autonomic functions, carrying information to the brain. The spinal cord nerves also transmit messages to the brain from the body, such as sensations of touch, pressure, and pain. Reflex responses. The spinal cord may also act independently of the brain in conducting motor reflexes. One example is a patellar reflex, which causes a person's knee to involuntarily jerk when tapped in a certain spot. These functions of the spinal cord transmit the nerve impulses for movement, sensation, pressure, temperature, pain, and more. These are all about spinal cord. Here we conclude central nervous system. Now we will move on to peripheral nervous system.